One of the lines of attack that Trump and MAGA are rolling out against Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, now that he is the vice presidential running mate with Kamala Harris, is that he mishandled or didn't enforce the law when it came to the 2020 summer George Floyd protest. Obviously, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the murder of George Floyd took place, so that became the epicenter of what became a nationwide series of protests. And again, one of the attacks we've heard for a long time is the Democratic Party is not for law and order. And then zooming in, their example of how that's the case is lying about Tim Walz's record, specifically regarding that summer. And now we have audio, and we'll review two different things in this segment. First, this audio of Trump actually saying he thinks Walz handled the protests and riots, any law breaking, perfectly. And you'll notice too, not just him saying something behind the scenes while he was president when this was actually happening to Governor Tim Walz that's different from what he's now saying publicly, but also a difference in just the compassion from each individual, because Walz is on the call and Trump is saying, you knocked those people down like bowling pins or something. And Walz understands the importance of enforcing the law, of course, holding people accountable if they break it, but also tapping into the pain that was being felt, and a difference in the two characters there. Then the second thing I'll show you, another example of the difference between the character of Trump and Walz, is comparing how Trump handled hot or heat waves, people having, or I should say heat strokes, people having some sort of incident at a rally because of the heat, how Trump handled that versus how Walz just did today. So here's this from Forbes. Despite recently criticizing Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's handling of riots in the state after the murder of George Floyd in 2020, former President Donald Trump was reportedly impressed with Walz's response at the time, according to audio obtained by ABC News of the former president. And here it is.
I know Governor Walz is on the phone, and we spoke, and I fully agree with the way he handled it the last couple of days. I asked him to do that, and the whole world was laughing. 3 days later, I spoke to the governor. The governor's, I think, on the call, and he's an excellent guy. You've got a big National Guard out there that's ready to come in and fight like hell. I tell you, what they did in Minneapolis was incredible. They went in and dominated. And it happened immediately. Tim is on the phone now, Tim Walz. Again, I was very happy with the last couple of days, Tim. You called up big numbers, and the big numbers knocked them out so fast, it was like bowling pins.
Our city is grieving and in pain. And I would just say, as far as the potential, the peaceful protesters who are expressing an outrage that is real. They witnessed 8 minutes of a man dying in front of them. At that point in time, I did something unprecedented. I mobilized the entire Minnesota National Guard, and that's what the president was alluding to with the size of the force was capable. But I think, again, Mr. President, you asked on explaining this, I would just say, it's going to be very difficult. There are bad actors in this, but there is such a legitimate anger. Our real dilemma here is the transition back is to the catalyst that sparked this across the country, and that was what happened with the Minneapolis Police Department. So what we did is a lot of this, what you saw yesterday, was engaging civic leaders and the peaceful protests. And I would just close with, I think the guidance is you got to get a handle on it with that force. That is absolutely correct. And then the transition in the next phase is trying to get those spaces for the peaceful protests. And I'm happy to do things that we have to look at of how do we get reforms.
Look at that. Look at the difference in so many ways. First off, the Tim Walz on this call is the same one that we're going to hear publicly, as opposed to Trump with that two-face characteristic. But then also, Trump having this very lighthearted, unserious attitude towards something that was super, super serious. And Tim Walz being able to understand that we should absolutely enforce the law. And sometimes that means calling in the National Guard when things get out of hand. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure as we're doing that, we're also hearing people who are peaceful protesters and hearing their concerns and engaging with them and figuring out how to do both. And Tim Walz was able to articulate that. Trump, obviously not. And Trump was saying that Walz handled things perfectly. And now he's trying to say that Walz didn't. That Walz was somehow encouraging lawbreaking or refusing to enforce the law. And again, I've been saying more often lately with different terms, take them back. This movement, our movement, needs to take some of these terms back from Republicans, because no, in this moment, if you're supporting Trump, you're not the patriotic movement. The guy who tried to end the American experiment by blocking the peaceful transfer of power, the guy who called for the termination of the Constitution, etc., disparaged our veterans, that's not a patriotic figure. I do think patriotism is something we should associate ourselves with and identify with, and that often means loving the country and wanting to make the country better. Or that does mean it. That's what that means. And a similar thing with the term law and order, because these branding things, it seems surface level. Well, who cares if you use that exact language? The branding stuff actually makes a huge difference, which is why Republicans get away with being perceived in ways that aren't actually aligned with their policy stances. So with law and order as well, Trump saying that police officers should have complete criminal immunity, they shouldn't be able to be criminally prosecuted for their actions while policing, he says that's proof that he's for law and order. That's not law and order, because you're saying the police officers shouldn't be subjected to law and order. They shouldn't have the law enforced when it comes to them. That doesn't make any sense. We can want laws to be enforced while wanting to make proper investments, while also wanting to make sure we have properly trained officers who don't treat people unfairly and unjustly, and who are held accountable when they do. And actually, the Democratic Party's record in recent years in federal investments is much better in wanting to properly invest in public safety, the Biden-Harris administration, that is, versus Trump's administration. So that's another term that I do think we should take back. And in trying to deteriorate people's perception of the Democratic Party's alignment with that term, Trump's attacking Walz over the summer of 2020 protests and then the riots that took place alongside that. And that's going to fail miserably when you're on a recording saying something very, very different. Now, another example, a split screen here of the two individuals, is Trump complaining about how people didn't care enough about him and how hot he was when people were collapsing at his rallies, versus how Walz at today's rally handled someone having some struggle with the heat. If you appreciate this show and appreciate the work that goes into the needless usage of two camera angles and want to support the work we do, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button if you haven't already. Back to the video.
And if anybody goes down, if you start going down, we have people, they'll pick you up right away. They'll throw water. You know, they were so worried. Everybody was so worried yesterday about you. And they never mentioned me. I'm up here sweating like a dog. Secret Service said, we have to make sure everyone's safe. I said, what about me? Oh, we never thought of it. They don't think about me. I'm working my ass off. I'm working hard.
Freedom is when freedom is, oh, can we get somebody to help? Somebody's hot. Somebody's hot. Can we get somebody to help? You okay? Drink some water, folks. It is hot out. Get somebody up. Thank you. You get water? You okay? Yeah. Thank you all for helping.
Yeah.
Grateful. Thank you. Thank y'all. Take care of one another on this. This is why we gather. Look, it's hot. It is hot. I'll come again. They've got folks here. We'll make sure we're okay. But I have to tell you all again, in all seriousness, to come and gather like this, to talk about our freedoms, the ability to talk about what could be good. And I have to say, this idea of caring for our neighbor and kindness and a hand up when somebody needs it, or just the sense of that people go through things and to be able to be there when they need it, that's who we are. It's not about mocking. It's not name callings. And you see it.
And making sort of a special moment out of it once the person had received help. So on one side, but no one's thinking about me. And on the other, really pausing, taking time to make sure the person's okay. And then illustrating a point about just like how the people around that rally goer were caring for them, that's how we should care for our neighbors. And that's what these policies that we're talking about on a daily basis are supposed to be for. And I think we get caught up in, you heard him say, the name calling, the team sport mentality of politics, how it can become that, the partisanship, us versus them. And the reason I've been coming back to this so much is because I really do think to be correctly intentioned on this, we should remind ourselves of it often. It's important that we keep up with it. And yes, some of this is so salacious, it's fascinating, and we are going to engage in mockery. But why should we show up to a rally in the case of the people who chose to here? Or donate to the campaign, which you can do by clicking the link in the description of this video. Or canvassing. Or phone banking. And then obviously voting. We're not doing that because we want to win a sport. We're doing that because we believe in the principles so deeply that we discuss on a daily basis in caring for our neighbors that we're willing to subject ourselves to a lot of stress. Detaching from politics in the short term can be a lot easier because you not worry about the ups and downs, and the last month has just been absolutely stunning. Now we're in a really exciting period, but it was stressful for a second. And having to hear the hateful stuff that comes out of so many people's mouths and the demonization. But the reason we put ourselves through that is because we believe on the other end of it and engaging in it will yield better results for more people. And those people are what makes America America. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments. If you want to get extra content daily, you can do so by clicking the join button below.